Thank you. Thank you everyone for coming, and thank you Marisa, thank you John, and then other, the extension faculty bringing this program together. And because, this is such an important topic, you see a lot of questions, a lot of discussions early on with our keynote talk and then rangeland discussion. So I will be talking some of the cropland work we have been doing, and then some other things in cropland carbon sequestration. First to go on the need of carbon sequestration. You see this picture is from the wildfire in New Mexico that was last year. So that is, then these pictures are from Agriculture Science Center Clovis. It is our continuous tillage field, where we do conventional tillage, conventional management practice. Then so looking at this increasing frequency of wildfire, earlier in the keynote speech, we learned about a lot of other climate-related disasters. And then we see some of those happening in New Mexico itself. And then another is flood and drought. That is also, we see that happen in New Mexico a lot. So to work on these, we need to find a solution. We need to work on techniques that help us to improve resiliency, improve carbon storage, but go beyond the carbon storage itself. So to go very simple, to reiterate the process of carbon storage, it's all about input-output balance. How much carbon input is going in the soil, and what measures are we taking to stabilize that carbon in the ground, and to maintain that carbon staying in the ground for a long time. So here, the carbon sequestration, again, involves capturing that carbon into a plant and ultimately into a soil system, and storing that for a long time. And then when we talk that process, earlier also Joel mentioned, there are different processes to look at carbon, and then I put in different frame, like short and medium term organic carbon, and then another form of carbon storage, inorganic carbon, which is really long-term storage. But from agricultural or farming perspective, I'm not going on the inorganic carbon side, because in the agroecosystems, soil organic carbon sequestration is much more important. And then that happens through multiple processes. The soil carbon is stored in the living microorganisms, live organisms, so microbial carbon, undecomposed residue laying in the soil surface. That is also one form of carbon. And then decomposed carbon materials, which stays in the soil in the form of protected and unprotected forms of carbon, like dissolved carbon, particulate carbon, and then mineral associated carbon. And in the protected carbon, aggregates. So all these this aspect, decomposed carbon is probably important form of carbon storage and carbon sequestration. So in my research group, we look into all these different components, including inorganic carbon, just in a little bit, but more into this carbon flow, carbon processes, how microbes and other biotic and abiotic components influence carbon cycling and ultimately stabilizing carbon. How much carbon we can store, what is technical potential, what is the real potential in the ground, like what we get. So this is just the basic. And then this recent push, organic carbon sequestration as an approach to mitigate climate change and improve agricultural sustainability. This is the recent discussion. In recent years, we have been talking as a soil carbon could be a solution to food security and solution to climate change. Those are the two big questions. I think we are trying to work on those issues. And then on this discussion, why this soil organic carbon is really important is not just the carbon storage, carbon sequestration itself, or the climate change aspect, but it's food security and other ecosystem services aspect. So when we talk about, when we were working on this project, we were discussing whether we should term it as a carbon sequestration, carbon management, carbon capture, because that could mean a lot of different things. And then for New Mexico context, managing carbon management may be the balanced terminology, because we are talking both aspects. If we capture carbon, and then if we cannot store, or the loss, that net balance is not there, then if we are not relating that stored carbon with other ecosystem services, then that will be incomplete. That's why if we look at if we can increase carbon storage, other related ecosystem services that comes with soil organic carbon storage, you can minimize erosion control, because soil organic matter, those organic molecules can help hold the soil particles together and then form aggregates. When you increase soil aggregation, then it can minimize both water and wind erosion, because wind can blow only certain particles. The wind, certain wind speed can blow only certain particles. Then water, same way. Their forces can vary depending on the soil aggregates. And then soil organic carbon provides habitat for a diverse microbial community. That is, that provides both food and habitat for microorganisms to grow. So we need to look into that aspect as well. And then water purification and contaminant reduction, because that can, organic molecules can hold certain compounds in it. Improved soil structure, again, comes to soil aggregation, aggregate formation. And then nutrient availability and sustainable food production. That is, the organic carbon compounds, they have many microsites or bonding sites where nutrients can bound, and then nutrient retention and nutrient availability. That balance, it can help. Then mitigating greenhouse gas emissions, sequestering carbon carbon dioxide in the form of soil organic carbon, that minimize carbon into atmosphere, and then other nitrogen loss as a nitrous oxide. That is another aspect. And I just wanted to, being in the cropland, this is the global meta-analysis data looking at the relationship of soil organic carbon and crop yield response. There you can see gram per kg of carbon. So if you, in our New Mexico situation, we are between 0 to 15. And then in carbon, mostly like about 1% carbon or less than 1% carbon. So if we look at, although this will be challenging to increase carbon, like going to 2%, from 1% to 2% carbon is doubling carbon storage. But still, if you look this response curve, if we even a little bit increase the carbon storage, there is a chance, we can increase yield. But how challenging that is, we have been discussing, in previous presentations also you hear, and then I will also share some of the results later. But that is positive, that if we increase soil carbon storage, we can improve yield. Yield response is positive with carbon storage. And then this is, the shifting or changing view about carbon storage, and then carbon change, where we see like farmers can contribute. The earlier concept of carbon storage and then carbon compounds is Now we can store carbon really into the form of humus that is so complex compound, that doesn't break down 100 or 1,000 years. But recent years with advanced spectroscopy and then other scanning techniques to look at the carbon compound, really we don't see those complex compounds. It's kind of evolving process that you add more residue, and then that goes through decomposition process. Microbes process them into variety of compounds, and then those varieties of compound attach into the soil particles differently, and then contribute to different soil forming, different processes, ecosystem processes in soil. So with this dynamic process, earlier view was humus that stays 100 or 1,000 years and then contribute to fertility, is now changing. The carbon process is really dynamic. So if we're depending on our management, it can be lost, it can be stayed in the soil, or it can be sequestered. So that depending on the management, so your management choice can make a difference whether we are losing soil carbon, maintaining soil carbon, or improving soil carbon. And then depending on that balance, we are contributing to global warming, contributing to net carbon neutral or net negative. So that is most important, and then where that is where like farmers can lead this process and become a climate change solution, or cause of the the climate change, depending on your management practice. So this is, I feel like that is very important, that having that inert, complex material concept to more dynamic and then we can manage it concept is very important when we talk about carbon management in agroecosystems, including New Mexico agroecosystems. Then at New Mexico State University, we analyzed like what are the opportunities, why we should work on this carbon management, carbon sequestration, or carbon capture, emission reductions, these different projects. Looking at this New Mexico landscape, we have a lot of diversity. If you look at the major land resource areas in New Mexico, we have enormous diversity in our land resources, including soil type, land use type, and then other management variations. And then another aspect is climate and weather variability in New Mexico. We have 6-7 different type of major climatic regions in New Mexico. Then when you look at the unique opportunities as NMSU, we have a science center pretty much representing these different major land resource areas and then climatic zones. So whatever we learn, whether that is carbon sequestration positive, net neutral, or carbon loss scenario, we can learn a great deal of information if we utilize our existing resource and then existing land area, climatic zones. So we will learn like where we can get net sequestration, where we will be net balance, and then where we need to focus on minimizing loss if we cannot increase carbon sequestration. So that is how we started working on this carbon management project. And so we wanted to, on this project, we wanted to utilize this existing data, existing resource, what we have been working to implement this carbon management practice into a broader landscape like urban lands, rainlands, forest, cropping systems, and then work on establishing baseline carbon sequestration potential through demonstration in different science centers, and then involving this extension activities, educating students, this like where it is possible, where it is not possible. So this is specific about the project we are working all together, which have research, education, and extension component. But today I will be just focusing, now onward, I will be just focusing on cropland effort. Rangeland, Joel already mentioned, and then overall, we hear from our keynote speaker, and you will learn about other landscape later. But I will now move to cropland carbon sequestration. Okay, before going on to that, we also did a look at global scale data. I will be presenting some of the data from our work, and then just last month we published this paper looking at the global drylands, arid and semi-arid ecosystem, where we get less than 600 millimeter precipitation. And then that area covers almost like 40% of the land mass in the world. And then we collected data from different studies in cropland systems, and then where we stand, where New Mexico or Western United States stands as compared to this global distribution of carbon sequestration projects in a different part of the world. There we identify, the key challenges is we don't have technologies to enable carbon sequestration in water limited environments. What works for the water limited environment? For example, desert adapted plants. How much research we have done on those species? What techniques really works on this, sandy, low inherent fertility soil? Yes, our potential is high, but data is really limited. A lot of data available from more humid, more temperate ecosystems. So that is what we identify. And then absence of quantifiable and verifiable benefits of sequestering atmospheric carbon. I think on previous presentation, we see enormous variability in the data. And then what is the reliable estimate? How can we improve that estimate? That is another thing. We could not. We see that enormous variability, and then how to relate with this carbon market, emerging carbon market, because dealing with that high variability and then getting reliable information that the farmers can get benefit or ranchers can get benefit from that data. And so since there is no data, and then the policy is also lacking, because we dealing with this variability, and then how to incentivize those carbon management practices, carbon sequestration practices, or minimizing that reduction is also lacking on these arid and semi-arid ecosystems. So on that context, I worked last year. I worked on another paper. Maybe our focus should be more carbon per drop, because water is the major limiting factor for net primary productivity on this region. Then if we can manipulate anything to improve that water use efficiency, and then a more carbon per unit water use, that may be the solution for the arid and semi-arid region. On that front, I see the potential to work on the crop physiology, the plant improvement front. And then the second aspect is looking into increasing soil water storage and water conservation efficiency, at the same time improving carbon storage efficiency. So that is, our group is more focused on this, but I see now, I know one more crop physiologist. I have been working with Sangu. Then, we wanted to integrate those techniques. And then others on the team, research team, we are looking at two aspects together. Maybe that can give next generation solution for carbon management in arid and semi-arid ecosystems. So going into the cropland specific practices, like carbon farming practices, we identified major management practices that has been implemented to improve carbon storage, include increasing cropping intensity and diversity, and minimizing soil disturbance, minimizing carbon input, maximizing carbon inputs, and other frontier technologies like working on some other breeding aspects, or these adding more recalcitrant material into soil. And then these increasing cropping intensity, I wanted to relate that with the earlier discussion. We are talking always carbon input as compared to nature-based solution, because we are trying to, when we talk a carbon sequestration, input is needed. The reason we emphasize more carbon input is if you look at the historic data in agriculture in western half of the United States, first 50 years of cultivation, when we opened the ground in early 1900 until now, or like first 50 years, we lost almost like 30 to 50% of carbon storage in the ground in cropland system. So the first step to go back or to restore that carbon is to adding carbon input and then stabilizing them into a soil. Yes, increasing cropping intensity like cover cropping, applying diverse rotation, mixed cropping, perennial cropping, those provide gradual solution. But we wanted to expedite that process, adding those carbon input, like adding more residues, improve nutrient management, adding soil amendments like biochar and other compost and other materials, or now the recent effort on breeding, like breeding for perennial crops, perennial vegetation that have a deeper and denser rooting system and more recalcitrant rooting system, so that we can put more carbon into a ground. So that is, my focus will be basically on these techniques on next few slides. For example, reduced and no tillage. This is the experiment we established. We started in 2013. Don't get this wrong. This data is only top 15 centimeter. So we see, this year we collected deep profile data up to 100 centimeter depth, and then we are analyzing that information. So I will get a better estimate. But if we look at just like a surface soil, this strip tillage and no tillage have more carbon storage in surface 15 centimeter soil or top 6 inch. The strip tillage have a little more, and then no tillage can store even more carbon as compared to conventional tillage. Then another approach in, we will come back on that slide again, because another approach we have been working on our field is cover cropping, where we started this experiment in 2018, and then we have no cover crop, and then grass, brassica, and legume mixture as a cover crop, and a grass, brassica cover crop, and grass, legume cover crop mixers. 3 different kind of cover crop mixer, because these different cover crop mixer have different carbon and nitrogen inputs. And then the main researcher is Pramod here. On his PhD, he worked on this project, but we collected data on forage production, forage quality, other ecosystem services benefits, but I'm just presenting soil carbon data from top 20 centimeter and then 0 to 80 centimeter depth. Then here what we can see in top 20 centimeter depth, we see a clear difference that some cover crops, not all the cover crops, some cover crops increase soil carbon storage as compared to no cover crop treatments. And then there is a significant difference. So you can relate this, but if we look at the whole soil profile, still some treatments are positive. The sequestration rate is positive in some treatments, but some treatments in the whole profile we did not see the positive response. But why I emphasize other ecosystem services associated with carbon storage we see limited positive impact in terms of carbon storage. But if we look at other ecosystem services like soil water infiltration, microbial community response, soil aggregation, those all the indicators are positive. So when we put this data in soil health matrix, we got positive response in ecosystem services. And then when we look at the crop yield, you can see, I did not want it to put the yield number. So this is the cover crop side, and then this is the fallow side. And you can see the clear difference in yield. When in forage yield, it was 4 to 6 ton gain in forage corn silage yield in cover crop system as compared to fallow system. So that is, I see that is where the agriculture can take advantage. Yes, the real carbon benefit might be small. Maybe the carbon credit program, depending on the species, you get variable response, but the overall soil health and ecosystem services response is net positive. And to look at the carbon balance also, we need to not only look at the carbon storage, because earlier also we talk, how much is stored, and then what is the net balance. So, Pramod and other graduate students, researchers, looked into net greenhouse gas balance on those systems. Then when we look at the net greenhouse gas balance, with cover cropping having a living root in the system, the net CO2 emissions is high. But because of the improved nitrogen use efficiency during that fallow period, then net nitrogen loss as a nitrous oxide emission is minimum. So that way, those systems were net neutral in terms of greenhouse gas emissions. Those systems, there was no difference between no cover cropping and cover cropping practices. So in terms of loss, it is a net neutral. Other ecosystem benefits, it is positive. And then carbon sequestration, some treatments positive, some treatments negative. So it is difficult when we try to quantify or put that in the dollar value. But if you look as a farmer, yield benefit and then other ecosystem benefits, I see some positive aspect of cover cropping. And then we look at that data as compared to this whole arid and semi-arid global data. So this is data from Western United States, and then this data is for top 30 centimeter depth. Now, Western United States, Canadian Prairie, and Loess Plateau of China, Northern Europe, and then Western Australia. So we divided regional differences in carbon sequestration potential of these studies. And then we did not include any studies less than 2 years. And those some of the long-term studies were up to like 30, 35 years also. And then you can see the variability in the data. So earlier presentation, you can see enormous variability in data, especially short-term studies. It shows, some studies shows very high potential, some other studies shows low potential. But if you go into long-term, the carbon sequestration rate is more or less stabilized. And then we calculated the rate based on these overall studies, that about 271 kg carbon per hectare per year is the net sequestration potential in different, in all arid and semi-arid regions. So that is important. And then we are toward the, the Western United States is toward the lower end, but still, that is what we have on our sequestration potential based on this literature. And then I'm coming back to this earlier slide. I just presented this 3 cover crop, no cover crop, and then strip tillage, conventional tillage. Then on this experiment, for 3 years, we added cover crop component in half of this tillage, no tillage plots. And then look net soil carbon and then net ecosystem carbon balance on this study. Then it is again top 15 centimeter depth. Then looking at the just like data coming this year, this doesn't hold all this sequestration rate as high, but it's still there is some benefit of no tillage and strip tillage that can minimize soil carbon loss, because this conventional tillage, if we compare this with the baseline carbon scenario, it is net loss, and then some of these treatments it is maintaining, and then some of these treatments a little bit increase in carbon storage, mainly in top 20 or top 30 centimeter depth. The lower depth we did not see much difference, whether with cover cropping or with tillage. And then data variability is also high when we go to subsoil depth. So that was our observation on this study. And then crop rotation. This one is really long-term study. I was before coming to New Mexico State, I was working at Oregon State in one of the long-term plots there. The Pendleton long-term experiments, which had a history of almost like 70 to 90 years. Then one of the experiments I was looking at soil carbon storage in top 20 centimeter depth with wheat fallow. This is complete dryland system, conventional tilled wheat fallow system, and then wheat pea rotation with conventional tillage, and then wheat pea rotation with no tillage. And then this experiment was established in 1964 and then maintained. I think the data was collected in 2015. So this experiment, the one of the surprising thing in this no tillage with pea rotation is this rotation system maintain even more carbon than native grass in those facilities. Native grass maintained since 1931. So that is positive on that experiment. But there is another experiment on same facility started in 1941 with a different fertility management, and then that study shows either negative or no net change in net improvement in soil carbon storage. So fertility is different, but when we just put the crop rotation data together, so we see positive increase in soil carbon storage with crop rotation also. And then if we look at the precipitation for this experiment, that is a 13-inch precipitation, which is similar to New Mexico, but the difference is temperature regime. That is much colder area as compared to heat in New Mexico, which have a big impact in carbon storage capacity. And then we look at again the crop rotation effects using that global data in different regions. And then here with the crop rotation, our situation is a little bit better than Western Australia, but the sequestration rate is lower than Canadian Prairie and then China. Then we could not collect enough data to analyze Eastern Europe. But again, you can see the variability. So if you talk to the researcher working on these systems, they are highly positive about carbon sequestration. Then some other studies looking at this carbon sequestration rate, this is you see much more skeptic response on this end. But when we summarize all these data, more than 60 data points on this case, then we get about 235 kg carbon per hectare per year for arid or semi-arid region. So this gives crop rotation, and then we did some of the work in grassland restoration and livestock integration in crop production. So this one is more a snapshot study, looking into different farmers' field, where we look at no tillage, conventional no tillage cropland, strip tillage cropland and on-grazed grassland. In these comparisons, on the deeper profile, we did not see much difference. Again, the difference is only on top 20 centimeter. But I feel like this on-grazed grassland store about 7 ton more carbon than cropland system. So that is typical. Like we lose a significant amount of carbon with cropland management practice, and then in the tillage management, the difference was subtle. Yeah. Then in livestock integrated cropland system, we did not see very clear difference here, but still on this comparison, we see livestock grazing is better than no tillage. I think that was one of the discussion I had with the farmers, that we conventional tillage but grazing, that can aid a little bit more carbon storage. Although if we look at the statistics, those numbers are not different, and then the variability is very high, because we realized on this experiment, where you collect sample, if there is the pile of livestock manure, then you get different data. So our error values were relatively big on this study. So that quantifying livestock impact on the graze system, I think the earlier point, bring number of samples, it matters whether we see positive or negative response of this study. But this is what we find here on this one. Then after seeing this variability, we did another small study in the lab, looking at how this compost affect root dynamics in some of the crops in New Mexico. And then we applied a different rate of compost. No compost application, 3-ton compost, 6-ton compost, 9, 12, and 15-ton compost per acre rate. And then there you can see up to 12, we see kind of a linear increase. Again, root is very light, so the data is not significant. But if you look at the root mass, the picture looking at the root mass and then the area it can cover, that was significantly different on this study. And average root length density, how deep that can go and how they can spread wide. This one is greenhouse study we just did in a pot, because in the field we tried to collect a root. It was a disaster. In the dry. Okay. So this was I think we can relate that with the tilled system, but the greenhouse study, the field situation might be different. I just wanted to show. And then the biochar and carbon, this one, I know John and Katie have been working a lot, but with the start of this project, we also started looking like what is the carbon potential feedstock for biochar production, and then look at their carbon sequestration potential. Looks like that is one of the promising options in New Mexico. Also, we have not gone into that cost or carbon and energy footprint aspect of it. But if we just look at, for example, pecan bearing acreage, 2022 data shows about 47,000 acres, pecan bearing area. Then if we use a 5:1 biomass biochar conversion ratio, still we can get about 8,000 tons of biochar just from pecan. I think this biomass to biochar ratio, it depends on pyrolysis conditions, but I use more conservative data. At least like we can get this much. And then pecan cell, another about 8,000 tons of biochar we can produce. And I asked, Katie to give some of the biochar, and then my graduate student now looking into collecting some preliminary data to look at the biochar's potential to mitigate greenhouse gas emissions and then carbon storage. So this data I just got last night from the student, and then we put together hemp wood biochar, cattle manure, and pecan wood biochar with no biochar application. You can see nitrous oxide emission, which is big contributor to greenhouse gas emission, and have almost like 300 times more CO2 equivalent. Two biochar, hemp wood and then cattle manure, can substantially reduce N2O emissions rate. Then this is very preliminary data. When I see like Katie is coming, I asked, hey, can I get this data? So I ate it in the last minute because looking at this, and then CO2 also, the cattle manure have more CO2 emissions, and the pecan would have a little more CO2 emissions. But I think hemp have a low CO2 and then low N2O. So this is exciting. And then on this experiment, now we are taking this soil from this pot into now lab experiment, mesocosm experiment, where we will be monitoring how quickly this biochar carbon breaks down. Because what we see is when we apply biochar, it took some of the nitrogen from the soil, and then so looking at how this nitrogen and then carbon in the biochar play into different systems. So that is one study is still ongoing, and then very preliminary data from one season. Then biochar from forest thinning. So this one is also we estimated just like forest acreage in New Mexico. Then if we have efficient technology to harvest and then reutilize this forest biomass into biochar production, or better manage the forest so that we can how much we can get through forest biochar. Total biochar production potential is very high as compared to the cropland systems. And then looking at the half-life of biochar, it looks like that is one potential option for New Mexico. But how efficiently we can collect that biomass, the net carbon energy balance of pyrolysis process, and then that is whole different question. But looking at the biomass we have and then harvest potential, that is one of the biomass resource we can get. And then now we look at these different biochars. Again, the same set of experiment. Earlier those were agricultural residues, and then we look at the different forest biochar. All these are forest products and wood pellet. And then we see very interesting result, in terms of cumulative CO2 emissions and then nitrous oxide emissions. So, some have nitrous oxide mitigation potential, some have CO2 mitigation potential. So this one still need to study more how that plays into soil, and then stability of that carbon, how long we can keep in the ground. So we will be working on this one also, this data, and plus I think we are getting more funding to look at actual application in the field, and then look at how that goes into field condition. Okay, and I think before closing, I really want to emphasize this. New Mexico, especially eastern New Mexico, we are facing Ogallala water situation, that we are losing irrigation water. Then if we look at the entire New Mexico, our situation is not very different. You know, our irrigation capacity is going down. Then if we look at irrigated versus dry land and the native grassland system, this is just like the carbon stock in top 30 centimeter soil. Dry land conventional tillage, fallow based cropping systems, we have really low carbon storage. And then dry land no tillage system, a little bit more in the top 30 centimeter. And then irrigated no tillage, it is better. And when we go on native grass system, we have a lot more carbon storage. So our management, when we are losing irrigation capacity from irrigated system to dry land system, depending on how we manage our land, we can be really huge source of atmospheric carbon, or we can minimize that source. Maybe not sequestration, because when we go on dry land, sequestration might be a daunting task until we convert 100% to the native grass system. So, but why this is carbon management is important is, if we cannot be net sink, we don't want to be a biggest contributor. That is where I think carbon management in New Mexico comes. And then we need to, if we can sequester, if we can be positive, we need to work on those. Otherwise, we don't want to be on this end and then lose a lot of carbon. That is, I really wanted to emphasize that, a lot of carbon sequestration discussion, we cannot get benefit or carbon credit, but still we need to work on it. That is my thought. And then, to manage that water and carbon, I think Dr. Angadi is here. One approach we have been trying, looking at the carbon storage, is modifying this center pivot irrigation system, integrating native grasses. I don't have, I think, time to go all the detail, but that is integrating grass into at least like the portion of the land that is transitioning into dry land into a native grass system. We can increase carbon storage, or at least maintain carbon storage on the grass, and then get other ecosystem services I discussed earlier. So looking at that, that could be one option. Another is looking at that, pasture cropping, other cropping options, where we work on, I know several breeders are working into annual cropping system to perennial cropping systems, or working on breeding engineering aspects to increase root recalcitrance, root mass, and rooting depth. So those aspects, I think that could be another focus for our area to enhance carbon storage in our ecosystems. And at the end, everything matters. Every little step can help increase carbon storage. So we need to work on multiple techniques. Our potential is small, but also if we look at our cropland, our rangeland area, we have a vast area. Maybe some farmers in Midwest can get 2 ton carbon storage per acre per year. Our is only 200 kg, like 1/10 of that. But if we multiply that into a scale, our rangeland area, then we can get more benefit from some of those farmers who is operating on less than 100 acre versus farmers working on 1,000 acres. But the question is that variability, how we efficiently measure and then minimize that variability is the major question, and we need to, I think we all need to work on that. Thank you.